This is Outnumbered. I'm Andrea Tanteros, and here with us today, Harris Faulkner, Katie Pavlich, Kirsten Powers, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, the host of Huckabee, Governor Mike Huckabee. He's back and he's outnumbered.
Very much.
Very
much. Great to be back with you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Welcome to the show.
Good day to have you along. We've got a lot of big stories that are happening.
Not much going on, but we'll make it up.
Right. Yeah, right. Immigration 2016.
Oh, lots of
Can't
stuff.
wait to weigh in with you on Immigration 2016.
I've got to go. All right.
No, you are tethered to this couch for the next 60 minutes. Here we go. Well, is he rolling the dice on immigration? Determined to go at it alone, President Obama on his way to Las Vegas to sign an executive order that may shield up to 5 million illegal immigrants from deportation. But the president facing tough resistance from some lawmakers within his own party. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin saying, quote, "I disagree with the president's decision to use executive action to make changes to our immigration system. And I disagree with the House's decision to not even take a vote on the bipartisan Senate legislation that overwhelmingly passed in June of 2013. We will only achieve sustainable, comprehensive immigration reform if all sides work together." And there are also those from the liberal wing who say that the president's plan doesn't go far enough. Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California saying, quote, "I hope the president will build on this significant step by fully exercising his legal authority to also protect from deportation the parents of dreamers and the hardworking farm workers who put food on our tables and support the agricultural industry, which is so important to our nation's economy." Meantime, there's growing questions about whether the president's move is even legal. Republican Senator Jeff Sessions.
Congress makes the laws. What the president did in this order is said, I am not enforcing the laws that you have passed, and indeed I'm going further. I'm going to give work permits, Social Security numbers to millions of people who Congress said cannot work in America. It's really a breathtaking overreach of monumental proportions.
And the president's executive action on immigration could soon trigger legal action. Texas Governor-elect Greg Abbott, the state's current attorney general, vows to mount a court challenge, saying that he believes the president's bypassing of Congress is unconstitutional. So, Governor, I do expect a lot of legal challenges on this. And looking at what the president's proposing, he is in clear legislative territory. I mean, this is broad, this is vast, this is sweeping, and this pushes far beyond executive power.
Well, the interesting thing is he said he couldn't do it just a few years ago because to do so would make him an emperor, and he was only the president. I'm curious. At what point did the law change, or was he crowned emperor and we all missed it? I mean, something happened here of cataclysmic proportion for the president to be able to come out and say, I now have power that I've never had before and that I even claim not to have had before. It really is an insult to the American people, and I think it's going to backfire on him. Howie Carr up in Boston had the best statement. He said, we're now going to import illegals to do something that Americans won't do. Vote Democratic.
Kirsten, what about the Democrats pushing back on this one? Joe Manchin, you heard from him, and Claire McCaskill, among others, saying, I don't know about this going at it alone without Congress doing it first.
Well, I would say I wouldn't read too much into that because Joe Manchin is generally, I mean, he's kind of bordering on a Republican. I mean, he tends to, you know, he calls himself a West Virginia Democrat, but he's a big critic of the president. Claire McCaskill is closer to the president, but she also, you know, she wants to probably run for governor. I think she's got some other things going on. Overall, the Democrats are behind him. They've actually been pushing him to do this. And I think that, to your point, I think that the president was saying all these things about how he didn't have the authority because he didn't want to do it. I don't know if he ever actually believed that he didn't have the authority. I think he didn't want to do it for political reasons, because it could backfire. You know, he didn't want to do it before the elections because it could potentially backfire with voters. I think that there are a lot of legal scholars who actually say he does have the authority, and so who knows what he actually was thinking, but I think that was a political act.
So if a Republican president in the future does the same kind of thing and just ignores the constitutional requirement of checks and balances and a full government, the Democrats are going to be cool with that.
Well, I don't think, no, because I don't think there's agreement. I think one of the things in this discussion we have to remember is that I know the Republicans keep saying that this is lawless, but there are some serious legal scholars who are saying, Lawrence Tribe, who's one of the most serious legal scholars in the country, says it's legal. So there is disagreement on this.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal, actually. Yeah. I think the goal is to get it into the court system where it's going to be until President Obama is far out of office, so it's no longer his problem. The new president comes in and says we don't want to deal with that issue anymore.
Katie, what happens if the court says that he can't do this? Then what? Because Ted Cruz is already saying we're at a constitutional crisis. To me, if the court comes back and says no can do, and the president goes at it anyway, that's the constitutional crisis.
And that'll be interesting because he'll have two pieces of legislation going forward in the high court, because you've got Obamacare that's headed in that direction right now as well, or almost there. Two things. Actually, the president said he couldn't do this as recently as last Sunday. So it wasn't even years ago. But you know, really, there's a striking image, and maybe because, you know, my family's in Tucson, Arizona, and I remember in April, and your family's there too, Nogales and that crossing. Do you remember when the Archbishop of Boston was there and all of the clergy members were fighting? I mean, fighting for people not to be deported. Under this president, 2 million people have been deported. So for Democrats, this was so toxic for him not to have moved on this early. And it really does make it potentially look like it's much more political, because 2 million people have already been sent out of the country. Why didn't he take action before?
Why now, Katie? Why now?
I think now it's because President Obama, he has an interest in sustaining his legacy with the far left, not necessarily with the American people as a whole, and that's what he's doing, because you have Democrats who are criticizing him both in the Senate and on the legal side. You know, there are some legal scholars who say this is totally okay, and there are a lot of legal scholars, including Jonathan Turley, who, you know, openly admits he voted for President Obama, agrees with him on a lot of things, actually agrees with a lot of what he thinks we should be doing with allowing 5 million people to now obtain work permits, but you don't do it by going around the system. And going back to what you just said, Harris, real quickly, in terms of the border here, there are going to be very serious consequences for President Obama's executive action that he's going to sign today. ICE is already readying thousands of new beds today because they know that there's going to be another surge of unaccompanied children. And there's the people who did this legally all over social media saying, do I get my money back? Do I get my 10 years of my life back now that I went through the process legally? Is the president going to do that for me?
Deported and separated from their children are still here. Now do you let them come back into the country so that you can reunite all those families? And you mentioned the lawmakers, the Democrats who are against this. You know, some of it, Claire McCaskill of Missouri said, well, I'm uncomfortable with it. That's a lot different than what Angus King is saying.
Well, and when he says we're going to give them background checks, remember that from last night? People are saying, how can we believe you? Your Department of Homeland Security said that you released non-violent illegals before, and USA Today, it turned out they were homicide, rapists, all these things. I mean, you can't trust that they're actually going to do adequate background checks and make sure that they're not deporting actual criminals. I want to get to the scripture point last night, because he invoked scripture, which I thought was, a lot of people were taken aback, and they thought, well, if this was so compelling, if you feel so compelled to quote the Bible, why didn't you do it sooner then? Remember this?
Scripture tells us that we shall not oppress a stranger, for we know the heart of a stranger. We were strangers once too. My fellow Americans, we are and always will be a nation of immigrants. We were strangers once too.
All right, Governor Huckabee, former minister. I decided to keep reading that passage in Exodus last night in my Bible, and it also says, don't bear any false witness and do not turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice. A lot of people think he may be bearing false witness with this move.
Well, and that's not the only place where it says not to bear false witness. It also says to respect the law. And Romans 13 makes it very clear that laws are there to keep order. This is a president that only picks and chooses the laws, and by the way, only picks and chooses the scriptures. Remember back in 2008, the president invoked scripture to defend his stance on same-sex marriage, which he said at the time he was against. Now, a few years later, he suddenly decided that Scripture didn't say that after all, which leads one to believe either he was lying then, he's lying now, or the Scripture got rewritten somewhere in between, and he was the only one that got the new revised version. This is a president that uses the Bible when it suits him, but he's not exactly what I would call a biblical scholar when it comes to aptly dividing the word of truth.
I think a lot of politicians, unfortunately, do that on both sides of the aisle.
But that does not excuse what he's doing.
It doesn't excuse it, but I also think that that, well, the Bible does say that you should uphold the rule of law, that there are unjust laws, and that Christianity always trumps the unjust laws. And so I do think that, in my mind, these are unjust laws.
Let's ask, though, who gets to decide a law is unjust? That's the question.
I mean, I can individually say that. I can say that I think it's an unjust law.
You can say it, but you can't act on it.
Yes, you can. The Catholic Church does. The Catholic Church does. They take them in. No, the Catholic Church does. They take in illegal aliens. You've seen the confrontations, and they have said, "I'm going to let them stay in my church basement in violation of the law because I believe that Scripture is above that."
The answer to that is to govern. It's to get the Congress to go along, and that requires persuasion and relationship building. This is a president who is utterly inept when it comes to the art of governing. He'd rather go make a speech. He'd rather go poke his fingers in the eyes like Mo going after Curly. He is not willing to sit down and build relationships and govern, and that's what he was elected to do.
It comes down to, though, in the end, this is exactly what the president is doing. This is a tactic to get us all to talk about whether you're going to treat someone like a stranger instead of upholding the law. This is playing on people's emotions. This is getting distracted away from the fact the president is going around Congress and issuing this executive order without a clear path of whether it's legal or not, right? That's what this is about. But he wants us to be debating about whether evil Republicans are going to treat people as strangers and if they're not equal to their fellow man.
And
that's what he's trying to do
for 2016 and to possibly help them to stop them being the Democrats bleeding away some of the Hispanic and Latino votership that they know that they're coming down in percentage.
Or maybe he thinks that they should just be able to stay in the country
or that.
It's a compassionate argument. There's no question. It's an emotional argument. It's a compassionate argument. But as Bill O'Reilly said last night, is it a just argument? And I guess that's what the courts will be figuring out. All right, Hillary Clinton may have her work cut out for her if she wants to run in 2016. A new poll shows that liberals put her in third place as a presidential pick, even trailing an independent, and some women finding a whole new place to take offense in crosswalk signs.
Oh, my goodness.
Yep, the town is replacing some don't walk stick figure lights with a figure in a skirt, and pigtails are now calling that sexist. Are you serious?
So now we're using...